Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Very excited to have you all here for this really interesting topic on dealing with emotions. And before we start, I just wanted to give a little bit of information. So throughout this masterclass, if any questions come up, you can always ask them in the chat on your right. So you can use the chat function, but also what's great to use is the questions tab, because if you ask a question in the questions tab and other people also find the question very relevant and interesting, they can do a little upvote. So then that question is going to go to the top and we're going to be able to see it much easier. And throughout the course of the masterclass, we also will have a couple of polls. Yes, Diego, just like this. Well done. And throughout the masterclass, we'll also have different polls that will come up. And you also have a little poll function you will see in your tab, and you will be able to participate and interact with the different questions and cast in your votes. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Yasmin and Emma. And we're really looking forward to this interesting masterclass. Take it away, Emma.
Thanks, Gabby. Okay, so also from me, a good afternoon, everybody. Really nice to see you all here. Well, I can't actually see you, but at least you're in the chat. And that so many of you are joining today. That's always, exciting for Yasmin and myself as well. So, dealing with emotions, what are we going to be talking about and doing together today? So the agenda looks like the following. We're going to start with emotions and their function. So what are emotions and what's the reason that we have them? We're going to be diving into being able to recognize your emotions, emotion regulation, and processing emotions. And I think also important to mention here that this is also kind of the flow we would also go through if it were a one-on-one client. So we're just high level walking you through these different steps. So I want to start with a question to you guys. And I'm going to do this through a poll. I'm just going to see how this works. I think I click publish. Yes, so you've got a poll and you can answer the following question. So to what degree do you recognize yourself in the following statements? I should aim to reduce feelings I don't like. I should aim to always feel as good as I can. Feeling angry is a bad sign. I have to control my emotions, and showing my emotions is a weakness. Let's see what's coming up. So you should be able to see this in the polls section. Quite a few different ones coming in. Okay, so I think most of you are resonating with at least some of them. I have to control my emotions seems to be the most, the one that resonates the most. I should always aim to feel as good as I can, and I should aim to reduce feelings I don't like. Well, thank you for sharing that also with us. But unfortunately, what you see on the poll are very common misconceptions we see every day in our clients, and are apparently also misconceptions that is very much alive, if that's the right word, in our group today. Because believe it or not, a lot of our mental health challenges stem from an unhealthy relationship that we have with our emotions. And that is the reason that we are organizing this masterclass, to really address these widespread misconceptions and this challenge that we seem to have with building a healthy relationship with our emotions, and ultimately to gain more insight for you on how to deal with our emotions in a way that is healthy. And to be able to do this, we are going to start with the basics. So what are emotions? I'm just going to make it a bit bigger so you guys can see it well. So in our everyday language, when we're talking about emotions, we tend to use quite a lot of different words. So feelings, moods, emotions, but they actually all mean a slightly different thing. So if we're zooming in specifically on emotions, it's important to know that an emotion is normally quite short-lived but intense. So this will be different than a mood that can be longer lasting. Emotions, they are likely to have a very definite and identifiable cause. So there's a reason that we're having this intense emotion. For example, certain emotions might rise up, such as anger or frustration after you're disagreeing with your partner or with a friend on a topic such as politics, for example. And concluding from that, emotions are then reactions that we as humans have in response to events or situations. So something causes us to feel a certain emotions. They don't just pop out of nowhere. And the type of emotion that somebody will experience is pretty much determined by the circumstance that triggers the emotion. For example, somebody can be really joyful when they receive some good news, but somebody can also experience fear when they feel, for example, threatened. Now you can imagine and probably have experienced that emotions have a very strong influence on our daily lives. We tend to make decisions based on whether we are happy, we're angry, sad, bored, or frustrated. And we tend to choose activities and hobbies based on the emotions that they give us, whether they make us feel peaceful or happy, or if it's listening to music, maybe sad if that's what you want to feel at that time. So understanding our emotions, they can really help us navigate our life with a greater ease and stability. So when we zoom in on an emotion, we can break it up into 3 parts. So initially, the subjective experience. So we have a trigger or circumstance that you're in, and it causes a subjective experience. This tends to happen in our brain, and then we get a physiological response. So based on that, lots of things happen inside our body. And based on that, we often have a behavioral response. So I'm going to dive into each one of those to explain a little bit more how it works. So the first one is the subjective experience. So this is really the interpretation of the situation you are in, or whatever it is that is happening to you at that moment. So maybe you have a presentation coming up, or you just had an argument with somebody, or you just heard some really good news. And in that situation, there are always certain details that you specifically pay attention to, and this can differ per person. Now, based on your interpretation, based on the details you pay attention to, and what associations you might already have with whatever it is that's happening to you, impacts the way you interpret it in a personal way. So it really makes it really, subjective. So you can imagine that you maybe already have certain associations with loss, or with change, or success, confrontation, feedback. So interpreting it, paying attention to different details and certain associations that you have with something really impacts the experience of the emotion, and in the end leads to us all experiencing emotions in certain situations in a different way. Now, even though there are a number of basic universal emotion experienced by people all over the world, researchers also believe that because of all of this, the experience of a specific emotion can also be really subjective. So when someone is angry, this can really range from mild annoyance to really blinding rage. And in that sense, emotions can also be multidimensional, meaning that we can also experience a mix of different emotions at the same time. So when you, for example, get a new job, you can be really excited about it, but you can also be nervous, and you can experience this at the same time. And for everybody, this excitement and nervousness will be experienced in a slightly different way. So that's a subjective experience. experience. So we have a trigger, we have our subjective experience, and this leads to a physiological response. So if you have ever really felt that knot in your stomach from anxiety, or your heart pounding before you're going to do something that you find a bit scary, then you'll realize that emotions cause a very strong physiological reaction. And in essence, that is what emotions are. They are physical reactions to things that you have learned to feel and think about. And this learning comes from that subjective experience that we've just discussed. Now, it's important to know that emotions come on automatically and you can't stop them. Jasmijn will dive into a little bit more. You can influence how you respond to your emotions, but the fact that they come up is something that we don't have influence on. And that is because they are firmly embedded in our body and really have that physical and biological basis. So when we experience a certain emotion, it leads to changes in our brain activity and changes in our hormones. As psychologists, we often try to describe emotions as energy in your body, and the energy really being those biological processes happening, and that the energy needs to go somewhere, it needs to be directed somewhere. So that's always a interesting way of also describing emotions. So we have the subjective experience caused by a trigger. Then we have the physiological reaction, so the energy going through your body, which are the hormones and the brain activity. And based on that, we then get the third part of an emotion, and that is the behavioral response. So this is the way that we express a certain emotion. Now, some emotions will be visible in your face, whether you're smiling or angry or sad, and others can be expressed through your body. So, for example, when we might feel ashamed, I can literally kind of make myself small or maybe turn away. But in my face, I might also blush. And when we are happy, I might get a big smile on my face and have more of an open posture. And this is an expression of the emotion that I'm feeling. But it is also, of course, important to mention that there are socio-cultural norms that impact how we express and how we interpret emotion. So that's a small side note that we do want to make there. Okay, so that is what emotions are. But what is their function then? Why do we have emotions? Well, emotions have an evolutionary function. We have them because they have helped us, and still help us deal with challenging or stressful situations in our life. For example, fear could be a really good counselor that helps us fight or flee when we might feel that something is threatening us. But emotions can also signal that something is rewarding, or what you might need in a particular situation, or signal to you that something is important to you. So based on that, you could see emotions as these kind of messengers, and therefore that emotions are really useful, and it's important and okay to feel them. As I mentioned before, because of this function that emotions have, they have a really big influence on the choices we make and how we behave and how we respond to certain people and certain situations that we are in. And maybe you may have noticed that emotions don't always come at the right time or in what we feel would be the right intensity. And at such moments, we do want to be able to intervene and influence the expression of the emotions. And that is called emotional regulation. And that is what we'll dive into a little bit later together with Jasmijn. So now we understand a little bit better what emotions are and why we have them. We can move on to the next part of dealing with emotions, and that is to be able to recognize your emotions. So I'm going to share another poll with you to answer the question on the slide, which is, which emotion do you struggle with the most? There we go. So for me, it is definitely fear. So I'm submitting it as well. Okay, so it's so interesting to see these answers coming in. So thanks all for sharing. Okay, a lot of people are with me. Fear is the one they struggle with the most. Ooh, but frustration is coming in on second place. Anger, sadness, joyfulness. Few people maybe sharing some things in the chat. I'm just gonna have a quick look and see if there's anything coming in. No, not specifically. Okay, well, thank you all for sharing that. Okay, so it's really great that you are already able to label the emotion you were struggling with the most, or maybe you were not quite sure. And that is okay, because the next slide is something that I want to share with you that can help you take that first step in dealing with your emotion, after, of course, understanding what emotions are. And that is to be able to recognize your emotion. Now, don't be intimidated by the amount of color. I definitely was the first time. And the amount of words here. I definitely had to Google some the first time I saw it. But what we see here is called the wheel of emotions. And often when we see this wheel of emotions for the first time, we notice that our vocabulary regarding emotions only covers the middle circle. So we call these the basic emotions of sadness. I see scared, joyful, powerful, peaceful, mad, and maybe a few of like the second inner circle, if I'm saying that correctly. And when we're trying to deal with the emotions that we're feeling, it's important to understand, okay, but what is it that I'm feeling? Where am I feeling it? What am I feeling? What is causing me to feel this? Because whatever change that we want to set for ourselves, whatever ease we want to create in our life, it always starts with awareness. And remember, the function of emotions is that they're messengers. They're there to tell you what you need or what's important to you, if there's maybe a threat. And also when we feel very overcome with emotions, like the intensity is really high, being able to label them can already give you a sense of control or a sense of ease, like, that's what I'm feeling. So zooming a little bit more on how you can make this practical, we've written down some questions here. So the next time that you're feeling an emotion that you're struggling with, to first ask yourself, okay, what am I feeling? So maybe in your body or in your head, what thoughts are you having? Where am I feeling it exactly? What might be causing you to experience this emotion? Remember, there was always a trigger that leads to an emotion. And another important question to ask is regarding the intensity of the emotion, because your emotions, they change continuously because they're so short-lived. And being able to label the intensity can also give you input on, okay, something is really impacting me. And a way that we often do this is to kind of describe your emotion or see your emotion as a thermometer. So maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, is it not intense at all? Or is it like hot red, really intense emotion? And what could be even more helpful here is that maybe per level of the thermometer, so maybe a 1 or a 2 or a 3, how does that feel like when you're angry? How does that feel like when you're sad? And when you're a 10, what is sadness in a 10 in your thermometer? And getting more insight into how these emotions feel at different intensities when you're experiencing an emotion, it really gives you valuable inputs to know, okay, this is what I'm feeling, this is how intense it is, and linking to emotional regulation, which we're going to dive into a bit later, will help you to know what to do. with an emotion when it's a certain intensity. Now, one last thing I do want to mention about emotions is that we often see people mention emotions or label emotions as positive or negative. Now, can you imagine what kind of expectations this creates about feeling or expressing certain emotions? Now, this links to the misconceptions we pulled at the beginning, right? So, in essence, all emotions have a function. All emotions are there to tell you something. But if we label them as positive or negative, it really puts a barrier on whether you're allowing yourself to feel something and express something. And as you'll learn a bit later, the more we don't allow ourselves to feel certain emotions, in the end, the thermometer will just get higher. So I think that's just an important takeaway in this part. So zooming out, after understanding what emotions are, their function, and how to recognize what it is that you are feeling, we have set the first steps in dealing with emotions. And I'm going to hand it over to Jasmijn to explain a little bit more about regulating and processing emotions.
Well, thank you, Emma. And as Emma already explained a lot about emotions and shared that emotions are useful and okay to feel. But as also said, emotions don't always come at the right time or the right intensity. And we don't always want to react right away based on our emotions. At such moments, it can be more helpful to intervene and influence expression of the emotions, also known as emotion regulation. So maybe as a first exercise, let's visualize a situation where you felt very tense, a situation where something happened that made you upset, or you're turned into a fight or flight reflex, or irritated or panicking. You cannot relax. So your thermometer is very high, like 80%, or maybe even close to 100%. You're emotionally distressed. There are a lot of emotions going on, and you have unclear thoughts. So maybe you can really try to visualize a situation like this, where you feel out of control or overreactive. And when you act on these intense emotions, you could do things you might regret, right? So it's very important to maybe calm down first a little bit before you start acting upon them, even though at these moments it seems like very difficult to calm down and perhaps even feels impossible. But it's good to know the following thing. At least it really helped me to remember these kind of things. So how you can feel can quickly change. An emotion is temporary. And there's a research by Jill Bolt Taylor, I guess that was her name. She's a brain specialist, and it shows that the most emotions last 90 seconds maximum. So that's maybe good to remember, that sometimes you feel an emotion very strongly, but it's temporary, knowing that. And so different things could help to calm yourself and get into a situation where your emotional thermometer is getting lower. So let's aim from like going to 90% to 50%. So at 50%, there are still emotions swinging around, but your thoughts and feelings collaborate better together, and you have enough space for someone else, for example, and you can feel and think at the same time. But maybe I first would like you to think for yourself, okay, what helps you to calm down when your thermometer is very high? So maybe you can share this on the chat with me. I'm looking forward to your answers. I see some are already answering. Taking a deep breath, small break, leave the situation. Well, apparently it looks like you don't even need this masterclass anymore, because I see a lot of good answers that can be very helpful. And we also see a lot of these answers in, for example, clients of sessions with clients, and also we use them ourselves. So first, for example, it's one example is breath work. So take a minute to just breathe. Like maybe you can count your breath. There's a breath work that really helps to calm down your nervous system. It's like 4 seconds inhaling, and for example, 7 seconds holding your breath, and then 8 seconds exhaling. This really calms the nervous system, and it helps to take your mind somewhere else by like focusing on the counting. And the other one is indeed like take a break, take a timeout, like taking a free minute to calm down. And you can also indeed, what was said in the chat, temporarily leave the situation that is increasing the emotion. So really like physically also detach yourself a little bit. Another one is exercise, like take a walk. This can really serve as an emotional release. Like research has shown that chemicals released in your brain during the course of exercise create a sense of relaxation and happiness. So that's also good to know. But also release tension, like really um, aware a way of doing it, like maybe shake it out. You can move your body or screaming in a cushion. That can also really help to calm down yourself a little bit. Other things that could help is visualization. So imagine a relaxing experience, what you see, smell, hear, feel, and taste. So really try to visualize it in front of you. So maybe you're on a beach with sand between your toes and wave crashing in like the ocean. And spend really a few minutes to think about this imaginary place, or maybe it's a place that you know. And the other one, which I actually use quite often, is shifting your attention. So, for example, by mindfulness or grounding exercises. It could also be a concentration exercise that like really focus your attention on something else. For example, apparently I'm into counting because you can also, for example, count down from 100 with steps of 3, or something that also needs a little bit of concentration. And I would actually like to invite you to think about some of these things that might be helpful for you, that you would like to try and experiment with. So maybe one of the examples shared in the chat or on this slide is something that you can like experiment when your thermometer is very high, so 80 or 100%, and just explore what might be helpful for you. And next time you encounter these overwhelming emotions, which strategy are you going to use? And as already explained by Emma, our emotions continuously, I cannot say the word, but change a lot throughout the day. So we experience different stages of emotion. This also means that different things could be helpful for you at different stages. So let's say that if you feel irritated, maybe something else helps than when you feel super angry. So if you can recognize the differences in these emotions, so to signal, for example, when you're irritated in an earlier stage before you get angry already, this maybe also help you to figure out what we need at the moment to avoid kind of the escalations to let the thermometer that high. So in this way, we can also regulate our emotion in a kind of preventive way. And we totally imagine that it can be quite difficult to recognize your emotions at the first place, but also the intensity of your emotions. So because it's very specific for everybody in the situation, what kind of emotions we are dealing with and how it works for you. So it can be hard then also to, like in general, advise you to a way to deal with the emotions. So if you would like to have more support with this, feel free to book a session with maybe Emma and me or one of the other psychologists to maybe explore together what is helpful for you in your situation. And so we talked now a lot about regulating emotion, but when it comes to emotions, it can be indeed that emotions come not at the right time or the right intensity. So then it's very helpful to intervene and influence the expression of the emotion. But when you try to intervene and control your emotions all the time, this is also not very helpful. But maybe I can better explain it with this metaphor. So if you're trying to push a ball underwater, it's a very hard activity, right? Like it takes constant strength and energy. And even when you succeed in pushing the ball underwater, it's not easy to keep it in place. And actually, the same applies to suppressing thoughts, emotions, or feelings. And when we try to put them away and suppress them the whole time, well, large body of research show that this takes a lot of energy, and it's not easy to do. So you're working hard, and then suddenly things can go wrong when you, for example, lose focus or are tired, and then that unpleasant feeling comes up again, and that fearful thought. And Well, actually, we can indeed compare it to the ball. So the harder you try to push the ball underwater, the more energy it takes and the higher it will rise when you lose control. So the same applies to suppressing emotions, for example. The more you try to suppress them, the harder and the more often they will come back. And this is called a kind of rebound effect in science. And it's also very normal and human that when we experience maybe unpleasant emotions or emotions that are not the right moment or you don't want to feel ever, we often don't want to experience them. And in general, we prefer to avoid pain at all costs. So that's super normal. And we do this in, for example, with emotion by suppressing them or ignoring them. And suppressing them like may seem like a solution, but it is not. So suppression works temporary. So at the moment you can maybe intervene with the emotions, and you are free of the unpleasant experience, but it's not a long-term solution. So in fact, as long as you keep suppressing it, what you are trying to avoid will continue to exist. So this means that we also need another strategy instead of only like regulation. So that is acceptance. So acceptance means that you give up the struggle, that you allow the feeling or the emotions without to push or suppress it all the time, and you stay with the feeling no matter how difficult it is. Or in other words, in the metaphor, you keep looking at the ball and it's maybe now on the surface of the water, and accept that it's in front of you. So the advantage is not only now does the ball have a chance to slowly drift away, after some time the ball will maybe disappear from your sight, and the emotion or feeling only gets a chance to change and go away when the struggle is giving up and it gets some space. And well, we already know that emotions do have a function and it can give us information. And in order to listen to the emotion, we also need to make space for them to know what they have to tell us. So you can let the emotions be there and possibly be informed. So remain present and alert to what is happening inside you and ask yourself, okay, what is this telling me? What kind of message does my body want to tell me or the emotion wants to tell me? What do I need right now? And also, what can I do or what do I want to do about this? And of course, like to really make room for the emotion and give yourself the chance to reflect and express and process the emotions. For everybody, different things might be helpful. So for me, for example, I really like listening to music because it's helping me to give space to the emotion. But for someone else, it can be expressing via movements or sports or writing, or maybe talking to a friend or a psychologist maybe. And maybe it is also a good question to ask yourself, okay, what do I need to do or what can I experiment with to express and make space for emotion? So maybe I think you all have great ideas. I think we are with a big group of people. So please also share your ideas of the things that you are using to inspire other people as well to make space and express and process the emotions. And I think we already said a lot, and maybe because I can imagine that there's a lot to take in already, and maybe it's good to end like with a small overview of some takeaways. Well, Emma and I think that these are takeaways, but also please take your own takeaways for this masterclass, of course. But these are maybe also some advices we want to give about emotions that we discussed within this masterclass. So the first one is emotions provide you with information. You are not your emotion. So this is the first one. The second one is emotions are not good or bad. That's often the meaning that we give to them. For example, we are not allowed to feel sad or anxious or angry. However, emotions only tell you what is going on inside you. The third one is become aware of that what you are feeling can provide interesting and even useful information. So use your body as an instrument. The fourth one, how you feel can quickly change. So an emotion is temporary. And then the fifth one, emotion must not always directly produce action. So you don't always have to act upon them. And the last one, and not the least one, suppressing emotion is not a long-term solution. As long as you keep suppressing, what you're trying to avoid will continue to exist. I think we're now already going to Q&A, right? Maybe, I don't know, Gabby, if you want to take it from here, or what's best to do?
Yes, sure. We can go into the Q&A. Now, so many good questions. Thank you so much for all the interaction, really. We're not going to have the time to answer them all, but I'll be looking at the questions tab right now. And the question with the most upvotes is from Tim. Even though we cannot prevent emotions from happening, do you have any tips in preventing or dealing with the physical symptoms that come with them, such as stomach cramps, headaches, etc.? Great question.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Emma, do you want to start, or shall I start?
You can start. I'll add anything.
Yeah, I think in the part that I discussed, I already said some things about what like certain things can have an impact on your body. So really, like, for example, that slowly breathing that I was saying, I think it's called a 4-7-8 technique. It really calms your nervous system. So it's really giving a reaction to your body. So this can be helpful, for example, by with lowering your heartbeat, for example, or lowering your breath, of course. And I think in this case, it's also important to see, okay, sometimes it feels like we're suddenly overwhelmed by certain emotions. So we are sky high in the emotion. And I think it's also good to explore, like, okay, what are the steps that comes before that? So that you are aware of, okay, I'm feeling a little bit anxious already. So what can I do? Maybe go for a walk, or to really look at these preventive ways of dealing with it as well. And well, with bodily sensations, I think there are a lot of tips and tricks that can be useful to prevent it. But on the other hand, if you get a color, for example, in your skin when you're nervous, that's also maybe a little bit of acceptance there, right? Like, okay, you cannot always control these bodily sensations. But Emma, maybe you can also think of something, or do you want to add something in here? Because I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it, of course.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you were really sharing was definitely spot on. If I can just elaborate a bit more on the acceptance part, it might feel a bit daunting sometimes if you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to just let this feeling be here. But often we see that if we try to control a feeling, or the fact that you might be sweating or you're blushing, just puts more attention and more stress towards that emotion. So even though the intention is, okay, I want to reduce this feeling, you often actually make it worse. So experimenting with just letting it be and seeing what happens, and often seeing it isn't as bad as we often think it will be, is already a really powerful tool. And regarding also what Jasmijn said about the run up towards maybe experiencing stomach cramps or headaches, yes, most emotions do tend to have a specific trigger, but if there's already a lot of tension in your body, it's going to feel more intense when a trigger does come along. So looking at that thermometer, maybe checking in a couple of times a day. How am I feeling? What do I need right now? Where am I on my thermometer? And that kind of toolbox that we shared of going for a walk or doing some breathing can already reduce any buildup of tension in your body, so that when a trigger happens, you don't feel like you're kind of exploding because of that trigger. I hope this gives a bit more clarity.
And it also now seems, of course, like very easy to do, but it's super hard to deal with emotions. And I think I know a lot about emotions, but I still struggle myself as well to always like try to deal in a correct way, because sometimes I'm tired, or sometimes I feel stressed. So that's also normal, and it's also normal that to not always know and sometimes be angry. Or so sometimes I for example say something to a friend of mine that I think like, okay, I should not have said that. And it's also normal to have these kind of things and act upon your emotions sometimes, even though it's not helpful, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Another question from Lamia. What could you do when the high intense emotions happen during a meeting with people where you cannot walk out or do any of those actions? like going for a walk or breath work? Really great question.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. Shall I take this one, Jasmijn?
Yeah, you can start. Yeah.
I think the labeling that we discussed can already be really helpful here. So when something comes up, of course, you have certain associated, I don't want to feel this right now, please go away, this emotion. That really links into what I was just saying, right? About that we instantly kind of try to control it. But just the fact that you can maybe label, okay, what am I feeling right now? What am I noticing in my body? In a way, you're kind of taking yourself out of the emotion by doing this, right? You're observing it and rather letting it consume you. So when you're not able to go for a walk or go and do a meditation, I think that would be a first practical step to take. Yeah. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that, Jasmijn?
Yeah, I think it's very indeed the recognizing part. Okay, I'm feeling angry right now, or very frustrated, and also to realize, okay, I don't have to act upon it. So, and for me, it really helps, and I have it. I'm very glad that I don't have this very often in meetings. So, but it can really help for me because I for example, when I'm frustrated, I feel tension in my neck and shoulder. So I sit already a little bit like this. Maybe I'm balling my hands already, and then I release the tension by just let it go of the. And it could also be like one breath can be very helpful for me. At least it is. So it's maybe I'm not like already like very happy and I'm at the moment very like excited in the meeting, but at least I lowered it a little bit already, like really, yes, do something with my body already helps in that. So maybe this is something you can try out, and to remember indeed, like, okay, I don't have to act upon it. You can deal with the emotion. Yeah.
Thank you. And I see that Kim has a question that also ties in with Elitza's question. At work, I'm always crying when I'm frustrated, which is something I really don't like nor want to do. For example, when talking to my manager, I feel that it makes me look weak and is not appropriate. How can I stop myself from crying?
Yeah. I'm also hearing the way you start with Emma, with the emotions are weak part, right? Like we often see this in this Western culture, maybe in other cultures as well. Emotional weak, and of course I can totally understand that you don't want to cry in meetings with your manager all the time. So what's interesting is to see that you actually feel something. So you feel the emotion frustration, and this is what we often see in people as well, or I experienced myself as well, that everybody has his go-to emotion, for example. So it can be that you feel frustrated, but that you show it in a way of like showing sadness, for example. And this is also super normal that, for example, for me, if I feel sad, and I'm showing maybe more like angriness, because that's my way of like showing that I'm not dealing with my emotions very okay. But the question was to how to not cry in front of your manager, right?
Yeah, how can I stop myself from crying in situations?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking, because now I have like 100 ideas popping up in my head, so I'm kind of, okay, let's focus here. Maybe Emma, you can already take it over, and then I will choose one to have more focus.
Yeah, I think the judgment that you have on yourself for crying and how you look at expressing your emotions would be a first step to explore. Where does this come from? Why is that you feel that way regarding your own emotions? And the reason I'm saying this is because, as we were saying before, the kind of want to control an emotion often makes it worse. So when you're feeling frustrated and it comes out as crying, Jasmijn, do you have anything to add here? I'm a little bit, I don't want to go into too much detail because I feel like this is something that would be really interesting for a one-on-one consultation, but I also want to keep it interesting for the rest of the group.
Yeah, that's maybe this is because we are both struggling by giving one perfect answer, and I think it's also because we maybe it's
It's
good
context
to,
a bit.
yeah, because it's a specific situation, of course, and for everybody something else might be helpful because there's maybe certain thoughts behind it or something specific in a situation that you're frustrated about, or so there are other factors as well that can influence why at that moment you feel like crying, for example. So I think this is really specific for your situation. Of course, I think we all know this feeling of like wanting to cry in front of your manager, baby, because that's a very normal, well, not very normal, but it's a human thing to feel. But I think it needs more exploration in the situation together, what might be best helpful for you, because it can be, for example, because you don't want to cry and that is you're trying to suppress it the whole week already. But it could also be that there are certain thoughts there that makes you feel irritated or emotional, and then maybe we should go into the content of the thoughts, for example, or how you relate to your thoughts. So it is a bit of specific now to have an general answer. So maybe I would like to invite you actually to have a session with one of the psychologists to dive into it a little bit more deep and to see, okay, what is helpful for you in your situation. Yeah, this answer your question. It's not an already solving your situation, but hope this helps for you.
Thank you. And then we have time for one last question. Let me check. Emotions are temporary, but I think sometimes the lingering feeling can last for the rest of the day and the intensity might increase again. Any good way to deal with this?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yes. I lost it. There we go. Emotions are temporary, but I think sometimes the lingering feeling can last for the rest of the day, and then the intensity might increase again. Any good way to deal with this?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
And I think in this case, it's also about giving the space to the emotion. So you feel a certain emotion, but it needs time to process them. So it's very normal that it's like still lingering throughout the day. And then I would say, okay, when you have time for it to give it space, then maybe you need to go lay on bed and listen to some music or write something down because in the end, the emotion will come back again if you don't do anything with it. And I really like the word emotion because there's motion in it and it's about movement. So emotions have to move before they can be processed, actually. So then apparently you still have to give some attention to the emotion because it's popping up again. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. That will have to be it on the questions, but thank you so much for your interaction, everybody. And I saw a couple of people were asking if there's going to be a playback. Yes, there's going to be a playback because this masterclass is recorded. So tomorrow, if you go to our website on OpenUp Spaces, you can look for on-demand footage and you will find this masterclass right there. Thank you again for your interaction, for your questions. Great to see that so many of you found this topic really valuable and interesting. And we're really looking forward to see you in our next masterclass in December. Thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.